Welcome to day 3 of the Argentina-Chile Dakar for 2010. We're in the dunes. This rally is underway. Number 1 coming into this year's Dakar, Mark Comer, has had terrible luck already, and it seems is continuing here on the 3rd day. On 4 wheels, the reigning champion, Janil de Villiers, is in trouble. Will he be able to keep his time loss to a minimum? Now on the second stage, which went from Cordoba up towards La Rioja, the conditions were very un-Dakar-like. Shades at times of maybe even a rally taking place in Scotland. The conditions were damp, the conditions were wet, the conditions were really quite grey and dreary. But it didn't put the spectators off. They were all out there, even in the hard-to-get areas. Sometimes the rain went away, sometimes it returned, but at least everybody put on a show for those fans who had made the trek up high into the mountains. The amateurs were slip-sliding through the treacherous conditions, whilst others were having more fundamental problems. We're out in cattle country, the big ranches, but the bulls ran at their own pace. Wide open plains, characteristic of this part of the world, as the blast goes on, whilst the local quad rider Hansen, he had problems. Other people just had innocuous spins, this bowler turning 90 degrees. But as many of the big hitters found out yesterday, you cannot afford to go even a metre offline. But what about Gerland Schischerit? He was a real star coming back through the order. He eventually got 2nd position on the stage yesterday, having battled through all of the other people who started ahead of him. Local Andres Juncker with his machine, he had a problem. Obviously the radiator was holds, and fortunately some of those spectators who had made the trek up into the mountains were becoming more than useful. They topped him up with water, he put on his winter woolies, and then he got going once more. As always, with a cheer for an Argentine. The cars were quicker than the bikes, but the risks are always there on a stage such as this. The locals were going on a crest of a wave, whilst some other locals were not having much fun at all. This is Christian Rubinetti with his Toyota. He had completely ripped off the front end of that car, and quite fundamental problems. Never mind steering arms and wishbones, it was going to be a long night out there for Rubinetti. The Dakar went on as others never really broke a sweat. It's stage 3 of the Argentina-Chile Dakar for 2010 as we move from La Rioja on towards Fiambala, a long road section, 259 kilometres before the stage itself. Actually not that long, at only 182, that's 113 miles straight into the bivouac at Fiambala. Much better scenes at the start of this stage 3 than the one 24 hours earlier. The rain had gone on and the conditions really were quite African. Down there at the start line, all of the bikes made a pre-dawn start to travel the 259 kilometres on the road section before the special stage itself. Jonas Streets for America just lining up there, whilst Luca Manca, who did well yesterday, said everything's all right, I'm up to 4th in the overall standings, but today we start this first part of the desert. Still a long way, but I hope by the rest day I will still have some strength available. The bikes head off into the distance, 2 minutes between the top 10, whilst by the time they got down to the quads, there was quite a few tracks on the road and everybody had a chance to, well, follow where people had gone before. Down there in the fesh of the dry rivers, one of the quads ran into problems and he was immediately in real big problems. The medical crews, though, tending to him, and as you can see, no better medical attention in such a remote part of the world. Also a massive problem for Jordi Villadoms, the Spaniard who is Mark Comer's teammate on the Red Bull KTM squad. He fell off and he was complaining of a back problem, back pain, so immediately he was helicoptered out, and that's big news because now Mark Comer hasn't got a water carrier. He's got nobody to prop him up from underneath. Now Mark Comer, he had a 22-minute penalty on the first stage. He only got informed of that on stage 2 24 hours ago, so you rather thought that Mark Comer, as the reigning champion, was deserving of much better luck coming into this, the third stage. Comer, well, he was playing at even Stevens. He was actually running into problems with his bike, even though he managed to catch David Castello on the stage. So that's for a couple of minutes. So Comer is up there. But remember that Comer in the overall standings, he started the day 22 minutes and 37 seconds behind the overall leader. But then the drama began to unfold. Comer having problems with the bike overheating, and because hot engines never want to start, that's exactly what was going on. David Castello came over to offer Comer some help. At one point, Comer shooed him on, but then Castello was actually in trouble himself. So Comer, Castello in all sorts of trouble himself. But in the end, the pair of them got each other going, and Castello says, I'm okay, if you tell me to go, I'm gonna go. What a gentleman Castello was to try and help out Mark Comer. He says 30 kilometers in, the bike was having problems, and then the engine stopped. I'm trying to restart it. I just hope I can find out how. And one last turn of that engine. Was it going to work? Well, Mark knows the bike inside out, upside down, back to front. And he gives it one more push to try and push some fuel through. Obviously the fuel's vaporizing, so try and get a bit of liquid in there rather than gas. Fingers crossed, and it fires. So Comer managing to get going, but that problem has cost him 21 minutes. He's lucky to get into the bivouac this evening here at Fiambala. Comer now 42 minutes down in the overall standings. That's a lot to try and catch up. So whilst Comer and Castello were having problems, what about number 2, the two-time winner of the Dakar in the past, Frenchman Cyril Dupre? Again on exactly the same kind of motorbike as Mark Comer, so would he run into problems? Certainly not for Dupre. He was victorious on the stage, winning it by over 10 minutes. Helder Rodriguez was chasing Cyril Dupre on the stage hard, and he was those 10 minutes back of the Frenchman. So Rodriguez has now slotted himself up to 3rd in the overall standings, whilst Dupre heads it tonight. Massive crowds out, big, massive marketing campaign on radio, in the press, and all of the South American television stations here promoting the Dakar and for the safe areas where the fans can watch. And they saw Gonçalves come through third on his BMW. So 3 makes of motorcycle in the top 3 today: KTM, Yamaha and BMW. The Dakar organisers bringing in the 450s with Yamaha, BMW, Sherco and Aprilia, and it's certainly working. So what of the stage 1 victor, Casto, who was trying to help out Mark Coma earlier in the stage? He lost time, he lost about 12 minutes, but he is still in second position in the overall standings behind Dupre. He's in touch, he's still doing exceptionally well for the Sherco. Francisco Lopez, the Chilean hero, Chaleco being his nickname, on that brand new V-twin Aprilia. It's certainly got the grunt, it's been able to push its way up through the sand, and after the bad day that he had 24 hours ago, 5th for him today. He's still down in 7th overall. Alain Declos still getting used to riding the big KTM after having a year off, and he's up to 5th in the overall standings. That's pretty impressive, just jumping straight back on a monster machine such as that. And just as they thought it was getting dry, they have to go through a river again. Luca Manca, the man who started 4th overall, finished the day in exactly the same position. He lost 17 minutes to Dupre in the overall standings, but actually only 5 to the man ahead of him, David Casto. But what of the man who was victorious yesterday? Drama befalling another rider in the shape of David Frétinier with his Yamaha. He lost nearly 2 hours today with a problem on the Yamaha. It's unusual to see the Yamaha run into such technical problems, but Frétinier had those problems down towards Fiambala. Third stage, and a victorious one for Cyril Dupre ahead of Rodriguez, Gonçalves, Casto and Lopez there in 5th position. Look at that lead that Cyril Dupre has now got. It's just over 10 minutes from Casto, Rodriguez, Luca Manca and Alain Declos.
C'est une de ces étapes où tu
Dupre saying it's one of those stages when you start in the morning and you say 182 kilometers, it should be easy. But it was 3 hours fighting on the bike. A real African stage. Physically hard with the heat and a lot of soft sand. We had to preserve the bike, which suffered in the first part of the stage. And then over the last 80 kilometers I preserved the engine, so I was riding quite easily, but that's the way rally raiding is. Helder Rodriguez, second today, he says today very hard. I like these days, even if it was very difficult. I got stuck in the sand 4 times, and sometimes I thought it was going to be impossible to continue because I was totally exhausted. But in the end, I was able to attack, and that's what got me second on the stage. I've climbed in the overall standings, so I think I'm now about 3rd. Very happy. Now then, let's catch up with Frétinier. Honestly, he says, I don't know what happened. I opened everything on the bike, took everything apart. I even had a spare ECU and changed that, and it still didn't work. No spark, no battery. I changed the fuses, checked the wiring harness, all the kind of things that you do when you're training to be a mechanic. After about an hour and 40 minutes, my friend Etienne Lormand helped me. I was fed up at the time, so I was happy he stopped to help me in the middle of the dunes. A bad day, but never mind.